All right, welcome to CMC Podcast. Today we're talking about Brandon Moore. Brandon Moore is our guest today. He spent 20 years in the Army in Iraq, and he's going to tell us about his story, what he's seen with the interactions between Christians and Muslims in Iraq, and then we'll hit on some other stuff. Brandon, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to be on. I really think what you guys are doing with the whole Christian and Muslim thing, like why can we not all get along? I really like the whole story and the whole podcast that you guys have going. I think it's interesting and there's really nothing else like it out there right now.
Appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
So, I'm dead curious. I've got a bunch of military friends who all enlisted for different reasons. Is there like a specific reason, Brandon, that you wanted to enlist, especially at such a young age?
So I do have, it is part of my family history. You know, my great grandfather was in World War II. He was an engineer in Germany. My grandfather was enlisted 3 years as a track wheeled mechanic. He was also stationed in Germany, but happened to ETS right before Vietnam had kicked off. So he didn't have to go to Vietnam. So kind of a family thing. And then, you know, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. I didn't grasp or understand the significance of it then. But as I got out, I'm from a small blue collar town, not a lot of opportunities. It was like go work at the factory or go be a mechanic, like my dad, my grandfather, and just not a lot of opportunities. Couldn't afford to go to college, and even if I wanted to go to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So, you know, grew up playing out in the woods. There was no internet, there was no social media back then. So playing army in the woods with my friends, man, I don't know. I just something about that. I was always kind of drawn to that. So I thought, you know, screw it. I'm going to go serve my country. It'll give me an opportunity to get out of the house, get on my own 2 feet, figure some things out. And really, I originally only enlisted for 3 years. I was only going to do 3 years, get out, kind of figure out what I was going to do. It just happened to turn into a lot more than that.
How much did it turn into?
20 years and 3 days.
You did the full 20 years?
Yeah, I joined at 19 and I'm 39. I just turned 39.
So you spent literally over half your life in the Army.
It's a weird place because I spent 20 years in the Army. I joined when I was 19. So I've been in the Army longer than I have been out of the Army right now.
Wait, so how long did you spend in Iraq? Was it right?
So, yeah, both of my deployments were to Iraq. First deployment was 15 months. I turned 22 and 23 on the same deployment. Second deployment was another 12-month deployment. So, yeah, in total, about 2.5 years.
And what years were the deployments?
So first deployment was 06 to 07. We got boots on ground in August 06, got back in November 07. That's how I had 2 birthdays because my birthday's in October. So we deployed in August, got back in November. And then second deployment was January 2011 till December 2011.
So for people that might not be aware, Matt's young. I'm 32, so I'm old enough to remember 9/11. I'm old enough to remember where I was, everything else. I was in the UK at the time. Do you remember where you were when 9/11 happened, Brandon?
Yeah, so I was in high school. I was walking through the cafeteria. I just got my little pizza, and guys were fixated on the TV, which was abnormal. So I sat down. I'm talking to a guy. I'm like, "Hey, what movie's on?" Thinking that there's just something on the TV that everybody's watching, and they were like, "A plane just hit a building in New York," and I'm thinking, how does that happen? Like, had to have been a a catastrophe in the plane or something, an accident caused it to go off course, something to that effect. I'm like, that's wild that a plane would, have some sort of malfunction. That's what I'm thinking. And then as I'm watching, the second plane hit, and it was like, well, that's weird, like that can't be a coincidence. And then the very next class I had was American history, and my history teacher was going ape shit. You guys are witnessing history. The world is going to change as you know it. I mean, he's going ham. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So, yeah, I remember exactly where I was when that happened.
So, then, again, just out of curiosity, just because You and Matt talked to each other for a while, right? I'm assuming, or not a while, but at least a couple conversations.
Yeah,
bare
we
minimum.
talked for a bit.
So for anyone that doesn't know, this is mine and Brandon's first conversation. So I'm just dead curious. Like, I don't want to say were you scared of Muslims post 9/11 when it happened, but did it give you a different perspective of like, fuck these guys?
Oh, so I really had no, I mean, zero experience knowing anything about Muslims. There were a couple, like two Indian guys that rode my bus, like from India, and they were like the closest thing that I had ever seen to like Middle Eastern kind of area of descent. Darker skin. I grew up out in the sticks, man. So there wasn't a whole lot of culture, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I had no idea, and then once you find out they were Muslim and then you start hearing more information, I'm like, these guys are crazy. They just hate us. They just want us to die kind of thing, and that's really the presentation that I was kind of given with the American media. And, when I was when I had joined the army, our drill sergeants had taken us down into the basement of the barracks. We walk in and there's rows of chairs set up. They sit us all down and they wheel out. And you're probably too young, but maybe you'll remember this. And remember in school when they'd wheel out a cart with a TV on it and
Yep.
a VCR.
Yeah.
They wheel this thing out and they pop a VHS tape in, and it's a video of an American getting his head sawed off by insurgents. And they say, "This is what you're fighting. These are the people that you are going to kill, and this is what they do if you're captured." So as a 19-year-old kid, it was very prominent, like displayed to you, like, hey, these are who we're going to fight. These are the people that want you dead. And if you get captured, this is what happens to Americans. So yeah.
Damn, they painted a picture. Just out of curiosity too, are you yourself Christian?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
then, go into that. Have you been like? I don't want to say it. I hate saying dedicated Christian, right? But like, have you been like going to church your whole life? Like Sundays are the thing. Mom and dad are Christian, the whole nine.
No, so my grandmother is very deeply religious. Goes to church probably 3 times a week. Goes to old people's homes, sings songs, like very religious. And she used to take me to church when I was a kid because she would watch me a lot of the times while my dad was working. So at a very young age, I was saved, went to church a little bit with her, but my dad and my mom didn't really go to church. And my mom and my dad divorced when I was 3. So I lived with my mom, visited my dad on the weekends, every other weekend. So once I, got a little older, we didn't really go to church. And I wouldn't say that I'm religious. And for most of my career, or I'm sorry, all of my military career, I never really had a relationship with God. It wasn't until, within the past year that I really found what I thought was meaningful to me and developed a relationship with God. They say there's a saying in the military, there's no atheists in foxholes. Obviously, I've asked him a couple times for some help once shit got hairy, but
I love
I
that,
wouldn't
man.
consider that. I wouldn't consider that, being a Christian or a religious person. I've always believed in God, but I didn't have a relationship with him. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
until this last year. So, um, yeah.
Fair enough. And I was just curious, just because I was curious as to. I don't mean to be talking a lot. It's just I haven't talked to him yet, so
Yeah, go for it.
I was dead curious. Like, so let's fast forward to your first couple of weeks in Iraq. What was that like?
It was nuts, man. It was a culture shock. I mean, you just don't know what third world dirt poor is until you see it. Um, I had just never seen anything like it. Guys shitting in the streets and uh, just living in dirt floor houses with the houses are mud brick. They have the average Iraqi has power 4 hours a day. Like it's not a good living situation. They're mostly dirt poor farmers. Um, so yeah, and the heat, like 130 during the day, and then all of a sudden the sun goes down and it drops to 80 degrees and you're freezing your balls off and you don't know why because it's 80 degrees outside. But the temperature change happens so fast. The desert just doesn't retain the heat. So it was wild, man. And when you land, it's kind of hot and heavy. You're doing what's called a left seat, right seat with the unit that's leaving. You spend like a week kind of watching how they do things, and then the next week they watch you do them, and they kind of give you pointers and tips and tricks, and then they leave, and then you're off on your own and you're up and running. So yeah, it was definitely just a culture shock. There's so many differences between our cultures. Like over there, men who are walking, who are friends, they hold hands. You
Yeah.
see that in America, and you're like, those dudes are a little weird,
Yeah.
like there's just so many cultural differences between. It's amazing.
That's the thing in
So
India
yeah,
too, by
trying
the
to get
way.
used to that.
I never knew that. I
Yeah.
was like, that's a little weird.
Yeah. So in India, if we were in India, we could walk hand in hand, and it's not weird. It's just because that's my friend.
And is that just perceived like brotherly relationship, or is there like there's nothing
Yeah,
unusual about that?
nothing weird about it to them at all, and
Yeah.
but there's some weird cultural differences, man. Like, there they wipe their butt sometimes with their left hand. So when you shake hands with someone, you only offer your right hand. To offer your left hand is an insult. There's just, it's just some weird stuff, man, that we as Americans don't. We're not culturally, experienced with all the different stuff that these other countries do.
Toilet paper's not a big thing in the Muslim community. You use water and you use your hand, but you use your left hand specifically
That
because
way,
the right
keep
hand
the
is
germs
clean.
over here.
Yeah, that way you keep the germs over here. That way, if I'm shaking your hand, I'm not shaking you with the hand that I'll just wipe my arse with.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, the right hand is considered a good one of the things you're supposed to do everything with. Have you ever noticed that I drink and eat everything with my right hand?
I will now.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll never see me drink something or eat something with my left hand. You
And
won't see it.
does that have ties? Do you think to like, uh, like biblical and other writings? People say like the right hand of God versus, or is it just like since most people are right-handed, you do clean stuff with this hand and more gnarly stuff with your left hand?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I'd be guessing at best if I were to throw something out there about that. It's just one of those things that I noticed while we were over there, and one of the things that you hear, it's like, don't do anything with your left hand.
Did,
Interesting.
what was the a first interaction with Iraqi people like? Like, did you actually get to walk the streets and interact with Iraqi people, or were you guys kept
Yeah, for
separate from
sure.
them?
No, like, we were there obviously to root out insurgents, but we were also there to win hearts and minds of the locals because the dirt poor farmers, they're not the ones with the ideology, the extremist ideology that are trying to, hurt anybody. They're just trying to live their life. So, we walked through markets, had different experiences and different interactions with Iraqi people, kids running up, Mista, Mista, wanting chocolate or, an ink pen or whatever you would give them, water bottles, but sometimes you learn like not to do that because they would fight over the stuff, like fist fight. And you're like, damn, like just gave him a pen and they're like fighting over it. It's almost a lose-lose type of situation. They're just so happy to get anything, but they just wanted to live their lives. And there were once we started rooting out some of the people that were oppressing everyone, we did improve their lives. They would be outside playing, whereas before you'd walk through a neighborhood and it's like nobody's doing anything because everybody's terrified. But it just seemed like most of them just wanted to go on about their life, and a lot of them were grateful that we were there. Obviously, the ones we were fighting were not, but yeah, for the normal Iraqi people, man, they just wanted to live just like everyone else.
Because that's what I was. One thing I was dead curious about was, did you ever get people mention like, "Hey, Saddam Hussein was like this. His sons were like that. This is what we had to live under before you guys showed up." Have you ever did you ever hear anything about how Saddam was or how his sons were?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we got briefings and intel briefings and all that kind of stuff before going over. Um, but so yeah, we knew that the Ba'ath Party, which was Saddam, was oppressive to the other people that lived there. He committed a bunch of executions, killed a bunch of people, very oppressive. And then what's crazy about that whole situation, I don't know how much you guys know, but like the Sunni were the minority population, but Saddam was Sunni, so they controlled the country. The Shia were the majority, but they were ruled over the by Saddam and the Sunni. Yeah, so there was a lot of tension, especially when Saddam was uprooted. You know, he was on the run, and the government kind of toppled. It was like, oh shit, now there's a black hole. Like people were fighting for power. The Sunni, the Shia were tired of being oppressed. The Sunni were trying to fight to keep control. So, like I was saying there before we started rolling on recording, but it was a civil war essentially going on. The Sunni and the Shia were fighting each other as much as they were fighting us.
Did you guys understand why the Sunnis and Shia were fighting each other? Like, was it like, or was your guys' perception just one's been oppressed, one wants to not be oppressed? Like, does that make sense?
It depends on, I guess it kind of depends on where you were. Like, so for me, I was involved a lot more on the intelligence side and a lot more entrenched into what was really going on in country, kind of a little bit more big picture. I think if you're just a guy with boots on the ground, you know, infantry grunt carrying a rifle, it was really just about going out, trying to kill guys that were trying to kill you, and then, you know, just trying to make it back to the base safely and trying to, just improve the quality of life of just the regular local Iraqis.
I'm sorry that I've got a bunch of questions. Do you want to ask anything, bro?
No, keep going. I'm enjoying this.
So, fast forward to you come back to the States after the first deployment, right? Was there a change in the thought process, or was it still the same? Like, this is the enemy, we have to fight them, let's do what we have to do? Or was there a change in the thought process of, like, why are we here kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, while I was there, I questioned, why are we here? Because we knew, I mean, I felt like I knew the whole time, like there's no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Like it almost felt like we were there because George Bush Sr. couldn't get Saddam. So George Bush Jr. was like, well, I'm going to take care of that because now we have an excuse to go in. And then the vice president, Dick Cheney, all of the contracts for the services that have to be provided for soldiers on base, like get food to the chow halls, get laundry, like all this stuff you don't think about in war that has to happen to support an army. All those contracts were owned by KBR, and KBR was owned by the vice president. So he's making millions and millions of dollars for all these government contracts, who's he's awarding to his own companies. So it was, it was just feeding the machine, the military industrial complex. I really don't feel like we invaded Iraq for any reason other than to get rid of Saddam and then make a shitload of money for some of these guys in these upper level positions. Did we affect a little bit of change with the Iraqi people? I think yes, for sure. But I don't feel like we had any sort of long-term plan or strategy that could have been effective. I knew as soon as we pulled out, they're fucked. The Iraqi people they're not like Americans. They're not, some of them are as patriotic as we are, but not a lot of them. A lot of them just want to live their life, and they're not going to stand and fight against the insurgents and AQI with all their money and all their power. They're just too afraid. They've been oppressed their whole life. So they don't have that same sense of swell, like, during the American Revolution, where it's like, we're going to unite and we're going to, fight these people. I knew that it wasn't going to happen that way. And just like, Afghanistan and Iraq, it just fell apart, once we left.
Damn. So then fast forward to the second tour you do. Now, just to make sure I understand, were your tours voluntary, like you wanted to go back, or were you told like, hey, kind of going back, bro?
No, for sure. I wanted to go as much as I could. I literally got back from that first deployment, and one of our I was in Second Brigade Combat Team 10th Mountain then, and one of our sister brigades, I don't remember if it was first or third, were getting ready to go, and they were asking for volunteers for to be a door gunner in a Black Hawk. And like me and three of my friends volunteered. We're like, fuck yeah, sign us up. That sounds like a sweet ass job. But since we had just got back, our brigade commander wouldn't let us go. There's something in the Army called dwell time, where it's like you get back from war, you have to be back for a certain amount of time before they'll let you go back again.
No way.
Yeah, so they wouldn't let us go on that. So I wanted to go before I deployed on that deployment. I'd went to air assault school, which is where you rappel out of helicopters. So I got to do that, but I really wanted to go to airborne school where you jump out of planes. And so at 10th Mountain, they're not an airborne unit. They wouldn't let me. They were like, we can't send you because we don't have any airborne slots. And I said, well, then I'm re-enlisting to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's the home of the airborne. And I know once I get there, they'll send me. So I re-enlisted to leave Fort Drum, which is upstate New York. It's 28 miles from the Canadian border, and it's cold as fuck, and it snows all the time. It snowed in June there once. I mean, it's harsh, man. Like as a kid from the South, I love the unit. I hated the area. And I just wanted to get out of there. So I re-enlisted to go to Fort Bragg. Get to Bragg. I'm like, hey, I want to go to airborne school. They're like, Roger that. Sent me straight away. Graduate airborne school, get back. We start training up to go back to Iraq. And that's just what it was. I thought that's what it was. I thought it was, we work hard, we play hard, we party our faces off, then we train, then we go to war and we come back. And I was all about it. It's all I wanted to do. But, come back from that second deployment, and by that time I was a staff sergeant, and I got DA selected to go be an instructor. So I had to go do that. And I tried to volunteer to go to Afghanistan with one of our other units to get out of that. But Army was like, nope, you ain't getting out of this one. You got to go. So
How was the second trip to Afghanistan to Iraq? How was that the same duties?
No, it was much, much different. It was much different. So the first deployment, 0607, was much more kinetic, doing a lot more. We did 112 air assault missions that deployment. I mean, it was nonstop, door kicking and capturing high value targets and all that kind of stuff. The second deployment, we were shutting Iraq down. So we went to Iraq. I was with the 20th Engineer Brigade, Combat Airborne Engineer Brigade. So we go to Iraq. We are the Theater Engineer Brigade. So we're in charge of route clearance, which is clearing roads from IEDs, so that people can travel through without getting blown up. We are in charge of vertical and horizontal construction. We are in charge of, during our time throughout the Iraq war, in order to travel to where we needed to go, the roads there are shit. We emplaced our own bridges. We have machines that will come in and lay bridges for us to go across and stuff, for the tanks to cross and all that type of shit. Well, now we got to bring those back because we're shutting Iraq down. We're starting to transition the bases over to the Iraqi army, and we're starting to bring the equipment and the bridges and everything that we had set in place back. So that's kind of our mission set. We're doing all types of engineer stuff, like I said, route clearance, all that type of stuff. So that was my job then. And as we're shutting down bases, everybody's just moving further and further south, until we get out, all the way back down to Kuwait, and then we redeploy back to the States. So yeah, it was a scary time because I'm like, as we're shutting these bases down, the number of personnel is getting lower and lower. And I'm like, man, if they just decide to overrun us, we are fucked. The chow halls were shut down. So it was MREs 3 times a day, no good food. Yeah. So yeah, the second deployment was much different. Still some kinetic stuff, but mostly just retrograding and getting out of there and shutting the country down.
So what was the Iraqi army like? Who made up the Iraqi army? I didn't even know they had an Iraqi army. Like who made that up?
Yeah. I mean, so there was an army in place, obviously, but most of them were from the Ba'ath Party. So once once we displaced the Ba'ath Party, obviously it was our job to stand up a force that could protect the country And as we had transitioned, a lot of our roles had went from direct action stuff to advise and assist. So now when we go on a mission, it's like, hey, we help the Iraqis we kind of take the lead in planning it, and then they execute it, and we kind of are in the back like going with them, but it's like you guys are leading the charge, kind of thing. So throughout that whole time, we're training them, we're transitioning to and we're building up the army. Now, obviously, insurgents can easily infiltrate those types of organizations, and there were insider attacks. There's been plenty of examples where Iraqi army or Afghanistan army have turned and shot up some Americans or other other indigenous forces. But yeah, so you just build it up and you train as you go, and we left it in their hands, kind of thing.
Did the US provide them with equipment, stuff like that as well?
Yeah, we left them a lot of Humvees. We left them the bases. We left them a lot of equipment, weapons, all that kind of stuff. They even had towards the end night vision.
Damn. So I know I've been talking a lot, bro. You got anything? Because I've still got questions as well.
I'm having a blast. I'm just enjoying you guys talking and learning.
Cool. So fast forward. No, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let me set the kind of conditions of, before we got to the first deployment. I was in Southwest Baghdad. 101st Airborne was there prior to us, so they were the unit that we ripped in. They ripped out. They had a rough deployment. They took a lot of losses. I believe they lost 67 guys on that deployment. I don't know the exact number of how many were wounded, but it was quite a bit. And we lost 57, and we had 270 wounded. But I don't like talking about this only because it paints the military in a bad light and it brings up a lot of shit I'm sure a lot of people would rather me not talk about, but I mean, it happened. The 101st had, from all accounts that I've heard and read, a really bad battalion commander who was just not good, very toxic leader. And so one of the units, they were in a rough area, taking a lot of heavy losses. Their guys were getting shot, getting blown up. They were not, in their minds, getting the support that they needed. They were voicing the concerns, feeling like they were falling on deaf ears. And, a lot of times in our organization, the enemy is talked about as to be evil, pure evil, set up to be almost like these people are subhuman. It's how the Nazis did what they did to the Jews, because they thought they were less than human, So that's how these guys felt. They absolutely hated Iraqis because the only thing they saw was the worst of humanity, So they snapped. I'm not defending them, but when you're in the most heinous environment that I can think of in war, something that the majority of the population has not experienced, if you don't think that that can break your psyche, you're mistaken. These guys, they just snapped. So they left their position, a patrol position, a guard position in the middle of the day, went to a house. They executed an Iraqi family. They took turns raping a 14-year-old girl. They shot her in the face. They set her body on fire, and then they left like nothing ever happened and went back to their guard post.
And this was the whole 101st?
Yeah, just the it was like, I believe it was 4 or 5 guys. Not the obviously the whole 101st is like you're talking about a shitload of people. It was a brigade of the 101st, which is probably like 2,500 people. So, but just these guys in this one little area. So they go back like nothing had happened. But that's what I'm saying about, like, they hated the people. They hated them, like, not because of the circumstances. in other circumstances, it probably wouldn't have, had that same disdain. Um, so anyway, that happened, and then it wasn't found out for a while that it was American forces. They originally thought it was sectarian violence, so it was like Iraqi on Iraqi, that Sunni Shia, this whole thing. So anyway, shortly after that, Zarqawi was killed. Zarqawi was the leader of the AQI at the time. He was killed, and so in retaliation for that, the new leader of they had changed it to ISI, Islamic State in Iraq, which later become ISIS. So they attack the 101st, had a guard position on the Jerf bridge that crossed over the Euphrates into Anbar province. They attacked that position. They killed one guy. They captured two. They held a mock trial, found them guilty, executed them, drug them behind a truck, cut off their heads, burned their bodies, and then booby trapped them. So, I mean, when you're talking about the back and forth, that level of violence, and then we get boots on ground in August, and then in May, a group of 2 Humvees full of our guys is attacked. They're ambushed, and everyone's killed but 2 guys, and then they're taken hostage. And we're searching for them like crazy the whole deployment. 4,000 troops across Iraq searching for our guys. It's called Dust One, duty status whereabouts unknown, and that's like hitting the oh shit button. This goes directly to the president. All national assets are diverted to find these missing soldiers. It's like, it's a big fucking deal. They don't take that decision lightly to do that. And there's a distinction between Dust One and then just missing in action, MIA. So anyway, we're looking for our dudes. ISI releases a video on Al Jazeera claiming responsibility for the attack. They've got our dudes' ID cards, so obviously we know it's them. We're searching, working 18-hour days, trying to find them. We find their ID cards, we find their weapons, but it's just like dry hole after dry hole, not get any intelligence, not get any closer to their whereabouts. And then it comes time for us to go home. We still haven't found them. So one of the warrior ethos is never leave a fallen comrade. So like, we take that very seriously. We always, even if you die in battle, we bring your body home, So their families, man, they didn't even get that of like their family, their loved one coming back home. They didn't get that. And we didn't get the guys responsible. And that was infuriating. That made me so fucking mad that had happened. A lot of our guys, I think, were just angry as fuck because we still didn't know where our guys were. And we had to go back. So we get back, and what else can you do but fucking carry on? So that was like May 2007. July 2008. So over a year later, we're not in country anymore. Obviously, another unit's already taken our place, but some Green Berets, an ODA team, rolled up an AQI leader, and he confessed to knowing where our guys were. So they took them out to the desert. Our guys are buried in the sand, unmarked graves. They dig them up. Obviously, they're their remains at this point, and they're identified through dental records and all this stuff. Signs of being tortured for months, that kind of shit. So that was all my first deployment. I was also there. So we got there in August. That December was when Saddam was hung from the courthouse. At the courthouse. So like, I was there for all of that, man. It was a gnarly deployment.
So you were there when they hung Saddam?
Yeah, they took him, like, he was sentenced to death. They took him in the courthouse. There was these stairs that went up both sides, and then there was a bridge across the middle. They put a rope around his neck and pushed him off and hung him.
Were the people like as joyful as what the media made out?
Well, the Shia were. the people that were being oppressed, the Sunni people were furious. I mean, that after that, it was nonstop VBID, vehicle. Like they would pack a whole car full of explosives, drive it up somewhere, and just detonate. I mean, and it was just all across Baghdad. They were killing each other. I mean, that made the sectarian violence go through the roof.
Just out of curiosity, then, in your opinion, was it the right thing to do to kill Saddam then, or would it be better if he was still alive?
I've thought about that, and it's almost like, you've heard that saying, "The devil you know is better than the devil you don't." Obviously, he was a fucking madman, you know. But when we took him out, we created a vacuum, and a power grab. So was it the right thing to do? I don't know. He was a shitty person. He should have died. But when you look at Iraq now, do you think it's better that we were there? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It don't.
Yeah, it's hard to say, innit? Because I know a bunch of people in the UK from Iraq, and some Shia, some Sunni. I didn't always care what sect they were. I was just like, well, you're here, you're in the UK, you're obviously here for a reason. It was weird, man, because half of them were always like, yeah, Iraq was fine, but the other half would have the most horrendous horror stories about Saddam and what his sons specifically were doing. So it is hard to say, innit? Like, were they better off with him? Were they better off without him? I don't even know, bro. Because all that really happened then, simplifying it, was the US leave, ISIS is then born, essentially. Unless I'm wrong.
I mean, there was a lot more to it than that, because there was infighting going on within the groups. ISI kind of started doing their own thing and started going and infiltrating into Syria and combining with another group, and then AQI was like, oh, so they didn't like that they were kind of doing their own thing, so they kind of kicked them out of the group, and then ISIS and ISIL, that whole thing became a thing. So they were even fighting amongst themselves.
Damn. So you do 2 tours. Why not do another one, or were you not allowed to do another one?
So once I got back from that second tour, like I was saying, I did volunteer to go on another tour. But once you are DA selected by the Army of like, hey, you're going to go do this, typically you have to do they call it one of the big 3. So you have to be an instructor, you have to be a drill sergeant, or you have to be a recruiter. You kind of have to, you kind of have to pay the piper when it comes to the Army on doing one of those. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I felt fortunate that I got what I thought to be kind of the best of the bunch in doing the instructor gig, because man, I wasn't really interested in being a drill sergeant, because those guys work some stupid hours. And it's 2 years on the trail with an optional third, and they just get worked to death. So, and then I wasn't really interested in being a recruiter either, only because you have to meet quotas. There's a lot of pressure on guys to get guys to join. And everybody who's in the Army has a recruiter story about being lied to. It's like, that's like, just a typical thing. It's like, yeah, my recruiter told me we were going for ice cream and I woke up in basic. It's like, that's obviously a joke, but yeah, I mean, my recruiter. So whenever I went to sign up, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I didn't even know what jobs were available. At 19, I had done no research. I just knew, like, well, there's probably guys that carry guns. There's probably some guys that serve food. There's probably guys that hand out bullets, but I didn't really know a whole lot beyond that. So when they were like, well, what job do you want? I was like, well, I don't know. What job can I get the most money for? Because, I knew they were doing bonuses at that time. They were needing guys to sign up. And so they offered me Patriot missile, which was $10,000 for 3 years, was the sign up bonus. So I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, well, you just drive around a truck with missiles on the back and you blow shit up. And I'm like, sign me up.
Sounds like a good time.
What he didn't tell me was, yeah, you drive around, and the truck is a fucking 18-wheeler with like these giant missiles on the back. and you get to you drive the truck, you set it up, but you don't actually get to shoot the missiles. Like
Oh,
an
damn.
officer in the back in the radar van gets to shoot the missile. Yeah, so like that's what I'm saying. Like everybody has a recruiter story. So to get to your point about doing more deployments, so the instructor gig is a minimum of a 3-year gig. So so I leave Fort Bragg, I go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is in the middle of fucking nowhere. It is in the middle of Missouri, and you are 2 hours from anything that ain't Walmart. So I'm having a great time. Um, so that's, like I said, that's a 3-year gig. When my time comes up on that deployment, I come down on orders to go to 3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne Division, and I'm like, fuck yes! Finally going back to a good unit, a unit that deploys, going to get some more action. And my hope was, I'd been to Iraq twice. I want to go to Afghanistan. Like, I want to just, I've never been. I want to go to Afghanistan, and that's kind of what I was hoping for. So I show up to 3rd Brigade, 82nd, and they had recently gotten back from a deployment. So I'm like, well, shit, I know we're not going for a little while. So we assume what is called GRF, Global Response Force. And what that means is we are now on a 2-hour recall. The unit is. Anything happens anywhere in the world, we're going to be there in 72 hours. So if the president calls and says, we need the 82nd here, you get a phone call. Doesn't matter whether it's 1 a.m., 3 a.m., middle of the night, whatever. You answer that call, and you got 2 hours to be standing there with your shit ready to go. So you're not allowed to drink. You're not allowed to go you're not allowed to go outside of a 30-mile radius of the base. And it's for a whole year. Like they take it very seriously, and you are attached at the hip to that cell phone. You're constantly, checking it just to make sure the ringer's on, make sure you don't get a notification you didn't realize, whatever. So that's a year long gig. So we do that. While we're doing that, we're going to the field all the time. We're training, going to different training events, JRTC, which is located in the middle of the swamp in Louisiana. We go there for 30 days and train. So we're doing all that. Well, something happens. We're working on some stuff. We're looking at satellite imagery of a country that I'm not going to mention. We're looking for bunkers, trying to identify bunkers on satellite imagery. And because of that stuff that's going on, something else happened in Iraq, and we had to send a unit. So we sent one of the other brigades because of what was going on with the issue that we were dealing with. So they got to deploy instead of us. They were supposed to pick up GRF after us. And then, so since they left and the other unit was already deployed to Afghanistan, we had to assume GRF again. And they had already paid for the other unit to go to JRTC. So we had to go back to JRTC twice in 1 year. And around this time, I had some injuries from all the rucking, jumping, running, throughout my whole career. My feet were fucked up. And I was like, man, I am tired of jumping out of a plane with, they call it mass tack. So everybody just jumps out one after another. And there's a million people in the air, and there's always an injury. Somebody's getting tangled up, or somebody's doing this, somebody's doing that. And you're usually at night, and you're usually combat equipment. So you have your ruck, your weapon, all your shit. So I was like, all right, I'm kind of done with this. So I start looking for a new job on Bragg because I want to stay on Bragg. I don't want to PCS again and move, because I've been moving a lot, throughout my career. I've moved a lot. So I find a job at 18th Field Artillery Brigade. So I move over and I start working there. But the day I show up, I'm like, hey, I'm here, whatever. And they're like, all right, cool, we deploy tomorrow. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah. But it wasn't really a deployment. It was a rotation. So they went to UAE, the United Arab Emirates. They went to UAE for a year. They were the headquarters fires unit for that area. But I had already I was supposed to go to my senior leader course for my next rank. and it was like 2.5 months long. So they were like, we're just going to leave you here on rear D to kind of handle everything back here. We need people back here, obviously, to keep things running while we're forward. And since you're going to school, you'll just stay here. I'm like, all right, cool. So that's what I did. And then that brought me basically up to the end of my career. We had guys doing some stuff. They were training, and we provided equipment to Ukraine when that whole thing kicked off. But I was not in a position that I was in a higher position then, so it wasn't like I was going. So that's kind of where it ended, and I never got a chance to deploy again.
So again, just make sure just in case you have a question you want to jump in, like go for it.
Yeah, I'll cut it if I got anything.
Okay, cool. Do you still, or I don't know how to word this right, just because I don't want to be an arsehole, obviously. Do you still, or did you ever have a disdain between Muslims and Christians, or Muslims in general? I mean, like, did you ever feel like, fuck these guys?
I didn't feel like fuck everyone. Obviously, when people are trying to do you bodily harm, you have to develop some sort of sense of like, hey, it's you or me. You know what I mean? Like, and it ain't gonna be me. I never understood the extremist ideology. I never, because it wasn't like I was studying anything about the Muslim faith, so I don't really know where this like extreme Sharia law stuff comes from if that's even in the Quran. But I hated the people that hated us for sure,
Yeah, yeah, that's
for
fair.
sure. But I seen people that were happy that we were there, people that were glad. I seen people that didn't give a fuck, just wanted to sell their little doodads at the market and live their life to go in a little convenience store, guys selling cans of Coke, and
Yeah.
just trying to live his life. People, little kids, like 14-year-old kids standing on the corner with AKs guarding their neighborhood.
So just to clarify, just in case anyone doesn't know, Sharia law is supposed to be an Islamic law, right? The problem is that it's not practiced properly. Like every nation, it seems like, has their own version of it. Each nation seems like they're a bit more extreme than the other. Like I think Saudi's still the only one that actually do execute people. So there's not one nation on the planet practicing it properly. Let's put it that way. There's not one single nation on the planet. It seems like every country seems to take part of it and then mix their culture into it. You know what I'm saying? And that's something where Muslims in general can be a bit of a pain in the arse. And what I mean by that is even something as simple as marriage, right? Let's say an Iraqi wants to marry a Pakistani. The Pakistani parents might not even want to agree to it simply because it's an Iraqi woman, not a Pakistani. But that's not a Muslim thing, that's a culture thing. They want their own culture and breed it into their family and kids. But I mean, from what I'm hearing, man, it doesn't sound like you don't know how to disassociate. You seem to understand that there's the bad ones, there's the good ones. Seems fair to me. I mean,
Yeah, I just never understood, there's certain things obviously in the Quran that you're not supposed to do, but it was like the bad guys were like, oh, we're doing this to deceive the enemy, so
mhm.
we can do that. And it was like they would break their own rules because they felt like they were, if they were doing it to kill the infidel, they were doing it for Allah. Um,
Mhm.
and they could do whatever they wanted. But I don't feel like you get really the same thing in Christianity. Obviously, there has been uh, a lot of past battles and wars that were fought in the name of Christianity that were probably, heinous and brutal, and not necessarily because they were thought they were doing the right thing for Jesus and God. But I'm only speaking to the war that I was involved in.
That's, no, it's fair because I mean I have the same thought process. Like, if you're gonna twist the Quran, that's fine, but you ain't going to heaven. That's always the way I've looked at it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also saying this as a civilian. Just to be straight up with you, bro, I don't have the courage, never had the courage to sign up for the military. So hats off to you. I give my hats off to every single service member because I don't have the courage to do it. Plain, simple fact. Also, I'm 350 pounds and I can't run. Let's just call it what it is. I lift weights. You know what I'm saying? I don't run nowhere.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it's a fair assumption. Again, like if you're seeing what you're seeing, how are you not supposed to think otherwise? Like if the example of Islam you're seeing is extremists, then yeah, I mean, it's not as if, one extremist is coming up to the fore, being like, hey guys, by the way, this guy's wrong and he's not talking what he's supposed to be talking. You know what I'm saying? Let's pretend Matt's an extremist. You know what I'm saying? I'm the nice one. He's the extreme guy, one of the suicide bomb people. Arsehole. It's not as if you guys have people walking up and saying, hey guys, this is exactly what it says. He's wrong. I don't want to do this. You guys are just getting to see the extreme end of the stick, which, I mean, kind of is what it is, isn't it? I mean, you're not going to see the good examples. It just kind of is. It just kind of works that way. It seems like, sadly.
Why do you think? Why do you think that they hate the West so much? Why do you think it is?
If I'm honest, I think it's a combination of a couple things. Number one, if you're in someone else's country, they just don't want you there. Half of it is they just don't want you there. The other half of it is the values as well. And what I mean by that is, this is a really left example, right? Or really right, I guess. I'm taking a mad turn. Let's just look at Lil Nas X as an example, right? He releases a music video depicting Jesus and playing basketball with Satan. I mean, not something that the Saudis want. It's not something that the UAE wants. It's not something most of them want. Now, the other problem is you have culture extremes. And what I mean by that is Saudi is a good example. And in Islam, you're not supposed to listen to music. Point blank period. No ifs, ands, buts. You'll find concerts over there in Saudi quite often.
I'm not supposed to listen to music? Really?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
fucking
not
wild.
supposed to listen to music. So you'll find the Saudis are quite, liberal, I'll say, when it comes to certain Western values, but not certain Western values. Now, the thing is, most of the Middle East is kind of like that, especially the rich countries. So Qatar, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, they're all westernized, essentially. They all have concerts. You can buy alcohol in the UAE. I know you can't buy alcohol in Saudi, but I'm pretty sure if you wanted it, you could probably get it. Especially the way
I've been to Qatar.
Can you get alcohol in Qatar?
Well, on the military base, you can.
Okay,
I
well
don't.
then, bike.
I don't honestly know about. I don't know about out in public. I know that we were not allowed to wear sandals or any shoes showing our toes. We're not allowed to wear shorts.
Why?
Um, that's part of the rules when we went off base. But it was mind blowing to me because I go to Qatar. We go out. Um, there's a giant mall. I want to say it was like three or four. It was like 4 stories,
Mm-hmm.
and the bottom floor are a bunch of kids skating around. It's an indoor hockey rink, and these
Mm-hmm.
kids are skating around in their man dresses, playing
Yeah, yeah.
hockey. And I'm like, dude, we are in the middle of the desert, and these kids are in a mall playing hockey. It was crazy to me.
There's certain countries, though.
But what I can understand, after we had invaded, certain groups being like, we got to get these Americans out. These occupiers are occupying our
Mhm.
country. That's something that I'm familiar with. But like pre 9/11, like what do you think drove them to to do these attacks, to hate it? Like what was the hate build up before 9/11? What do you think what do you think it was before
It's a
then?
good question. I've never thought about it. So
Yeah.
I need a second to think. I actually don't know. I've never thought about it.
So you're asking like what made?
Like pre 9/11, why did why did the extremist Muslims, I want to make clear, obviously not all Muslims, but the extreme ones, why did they hate us so much? Why did they want to kill so many of us? I
Which
know,
attacks? Which attacks are we talking? Are we talking the first 9/11 attack or not? The first trade
Yeah,
tower
9/11.
attack?
Yeah. Well, just any like before 9/11, really. Like the World Trade Centers when they were hit with the planes. I wonder like sometimes I'm like, why do they hate us so much? I haven't done a ton of research into it, but it's something that I've been thinking about lately. I know when the Russians invaded um, Pakistan and some of the countries in the Middle East, like we helped train some of the fighters to combat the Russians. Um, and then some of those guys turned around and fought us as well. But I mean, we weren't really occupying the country then. We were just trying to help them push the Russians out. So, other than that, I don't, and our religious differences, obviously.
Yeah.
The little Nas X thing, like, I mean, Christians don't want to see that shit either, but here we are in this wacky fucking clown world that we're in now. Um, so I can see, but they have to know that that's not all of us as well. Just like
No,
we know not
100%.
all of them are
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
extremist, you know?
No, I actually 100% agree with you. I actually don't know, bro. Don't, and
Is
the
it
only
like
reason
in
why I'm
order to
saying
get to
that,
the bottom of the hatred, we got to go back to where it began. You know, I'm about to dig in and do some research on that.
do some research on that. I actually don't know, bro. Because the only reason why I'm saying I don't know so wholeheartedly is because I know there's like a few extreme preachers in the UK, or there was at least back when I was young,
Yeah.
but I never got to hear them. Like I never got to hear what because my mom and dad moved us to the States. The very first time they tried to live here was when I was like 5 or 6. So going back to the UK, I had a wee bit of an American accent, right? And then we moved back again when I'm a wee bit older. This is pre 9/11, and still everything seems good to me. I'm like, bro, I've got white friends, black friends, everything's all good. Post 9/11, when we moved here in '06. So that was when everything the hate kind of died down enough, I will say, to where I didn't really get victimized at school, bro. Now, so it's genuinely hard from my perspective to answer, bro, just because I've no clue. I've always,
Yeah.
I've had, Catholic best. I mean, I went to Catholic school growing up, for perspective. So I actually have no clue. I guess because I will say it's definitely not the freedom thing. The whole they hate our freedom. It's definitely not that because the Taliban have been non-existent since gaining power back. Because at this point they don't want the U.S. back bombing the fuck out of them. They just want to be left alone and oppress their women. Which, fun fact, everyone, they're not practicing Sharia law properly. Women are supposed to have rights. So fuck the Taliban. I'll say that. It is what it
Also,
is. It is
a
what.
lot of people don't know prior to them taking over, women went to school.
Yeah.
Women were not fully covered.
Mm-hmm.
That was imposed upon them.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
they're not running the country Islamically the way it's supposed to run. The way I mean, I will say that the UAE and all them, they're a bit more loose with everything, which I mean I'm not mad at. They can run their country how they want. The problem is you have small pockets of Iran, I mean the whole pocket of Iran, I guess you could say, of Afghanistan and certain areas and even certain African countries. I won't say which ones because I don't know obviously specifics yet. That run it with such a tight fist that they genuinely make the rest of us look horrendous. And why they hate the West, bro, that's a question we're going to have to research, all of us, and figure this one out, because I actually would like an answer too.
So, with the from them having women cover their face to all the other stuff that they do you think that that could be linked to, you know, around 2001 is really isn't anything compared to now, but do you think that could be them looking at America and just thinking, look how degenerate those people are? Do you think that could be part of it?
Well, I'm sure that they think we're heathens. I mean, they call us infidels. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they absolutely don't like. They may not hate us for our freedom, but they don't agree with the way that we live for sure.
Like the
The
mixture
ones
of
that he's talking about that practice Sharia law, it's a much more like he said, tight fist portion of the religion than obviously than we practice here. I mean, you go on Instagram here and every fucking video is a thirst trap. So
Except for my page. Now my page is curated for weightlifting, wrestling, and cars and expensive watches. I'm proud of that. I'm not going to lie. I beat the algorithm. I'm super proud of it. Just want to throw that out there. I beat the algorithm. Just want to throw that out there. So you just to, again, so how do again? I'm trying to figure out how to word things just because I don't want to be an arsehole, right? Do you think Muslims in this country now are a threat?
I for sure think that there are bad people coming across the border. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're just Muslim. I think there's probably Chinese fighting age males that have come across the border
I didn't really think of
because,
that.
well, for sure, for sure, it's wide
You,
open, and other countries that do not like us know that the border is wide open, and they are for sure sending people in.
I mean, we got what, like a quarter?
Uh, I think
Go
it's only
ahead.
a matter of time, honestly, before we have another 9/11, just because we've got so lackadaisical, and with us having us, basically a wide open southern border, anybody can get through. So, you know, it doesn't have to be an Iraqi or an Afghanistan person. Like, Zarqawi was Jordanian. Um, people, there's people all over the world that don't like us. Plenty of countries can send people over here to infiltrate and conduct attacks. So I do think it's a dangerous time. I do think it's now's the time to have your head on a swivel and pay attention to your surroundings. And I do think that something probably could happen in the future, especially if we don't get control of what's going on down there. I think we're a soft target right now. I do. And now, do I think that we are in danger from not Muslims in specific? Not necessarily. There's plenty of other people out there that hate us. And just like when I was in Iraq, there's plenty of Muslims here in America who just want to live their life. And this is supposed to be a land where you can practice whatever religion you want. So I don't have any qualms about what you believe, who you believe, as long as you're not hurting other people, you know?
yeah. So then, what's the answer to it then? Like, what like do we? I mean, because you have people on the left who will say no, we need to let people in through the southern border specifically, right? Specifically the southern one, and what do we do? Like, I mean, I've no idea. I'm just a guy who lifts weights.
So I'm completely for people coming here the right way. Get your citizenship by all means. Come here. Like our country would not be this great without minds from all walks of life. You know, People come here as immigrants. They work their ass off. They build businesses. They stimulate the economy. They provide all kinds of stuff for the population. But when you have a unchecked border and people can just willy nilly come. We have no clue who the fuck's coming in. I understand people fleeing war torn countries and seeking asylum, seeking a way to, but those people have to be vetted. There has to be some sort of checks and balances to make sure that people that are coming in are not dangerous people. You know, the answer to me seems not easy, but simple. Like it's not going to be easy, but there has to be some systems put into place to make sure that the people who are just not just flooding in. So I mean, unfortunately for the people of Mexico, their corrupt government will not do anything about these drug cartels. Um, and the people are fleeing because they can provide a better life for themselves here in America. I get that. But I don't think we should just be letting people pour across the border because it's not about, I mean, obviously it is about helping people. But what I'm saying is all those people that are undocumented, that are illegal, um, they put a burden on the rest of the society in our country. It takes its tax dollars away from other things, providing foods, blankets, housing, this type of stuff. Dude, we have a enormous homeless population in this country. Before we go trying to take care of everyone else, we really need to take care of our own house. We have a lot of issues. The fentanyl crisis, the fucking, which is being perpetrated by the Chinese through the Mexican cartel. The Chinese people are giving them all the chemicals, they're teaching them how to make it, and then the drug traffickers are bringing it to the States and selling it. So again, open border, that's another problem. So we have to figure out a way to take care of that. But when it comes to being prepared, the best thing you can do is just always have your wits about you, always be paying attention. It's something that is just beat into us in the military. I don't know how common it is for the regular person when they walk down a street to be looking for threats, to be looking for a place where you could find cover, concealment, where, is as a military guy, it's just second nature to be all right, where's this guy putting his hand in his pocket for? Your mind is always working. So a lot of guys, some guys, when they get out, they struggle with that because it's like everybody thinks you're crazy. But you're not crazy. You're just that's been ingrained in you. And honestly, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing. When I go to a restaurant, my back is always facing the opposite of the door. I need to see the exit. I need to see who's coming in. I need to see who's leaving. I need to see what's going on. I'm not on my phone scrolling. I'm paying attention what's happening. Even if I'm talking to my significant other, out my peripheral vision, I'm looking for things. And she knows. She doesn't even say anything anymore. Usually she should be like, "What are you looking at?" I'm like, "I'm just watching people." It that's one of the best things you can do. Be more aware of your surroundings.
So, just out of curiosity, and I know this is a bit left field and off topic. Are you familiar with what happened in El Salvador recently with the new president?
No.
He basically opened up a supermax prison and locked up as many gangsters as he could, and they lowered their crime rate by like, I think, just over half, or the murder rate
Yeah, makes
specifically.
sense.
And obviously, Mexico won't do that. I think they get paid from the cartels too. If I'm going to be real, I think they must get kickbacks. They have to. And you know, again, this is a bit off left field, but do you have kids?
Yeah.
How do you see the future of this country for your kids, being that you fought for it? Like, how do you see the future for them being?
I'm worried, honestly. I feel like the woke left has kind of infiltrated the school system and the teachers are on board. So it makes me nervous. I'm actually pulling my youngest daughter out of public school and putting her in private school.
Sure.
She's going to be going to a Christian academy.
Clever. There you
Um,
go.
and not necessarily because um, I want her, deeply entrenched into religion, but like obviously these people are going to have more aligned with my values as
Mhm.
a more conservative leaning individual. And I don't really like the whole political thing. Like there's a lot of things I disagree with the Democrats. There's some things I disagree with the Republicans. I find myself as I get older a little bit more on middle ground, leaning more Republican, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but it doesn't mean I agree with everything. Like I've seen firsthand the military industrial complex and us go to war for profit. Uh, you know, maybe that wasn't the catalyst, that wasn't what kicked it off, but it definitely kept it going, you know. Um, but yeah, I'm worried. And so I'm getting a game plan together, now that I'm out of the military. I'm probably going to have a piece of land away from most people, uh, self-sustained, deep freezer full of meat, solar power.
That's you.
Big believer in that. And what's crazy is like almost every military guy you talk to does the same thing. They just want to be left the fuck alone. They just want to move out and be on their own. And most military guys, obviously not everybody, but they just want a piece of property to call their own. They want to be left the fuck alone. I grew up hunting, fishing from the South, self-sustainment. I just really believe in that kind of stuff. Knowing how to survive is important. Things go to shit. Nobody's coming to save you. So
yeah, like we were talking about the southern border, we got probably 250,000 people coming in a year. A lot of them are, you know, I've heard things about a lot of them being Chinese, and they're all like fighting age males, like my age. It's not hardly any women and children. It's these guys pouring in. We got people fighting in the streets, going crazy, and we keep hearing stuff from the WEF in where's the place?
Washington?
No, we're the Davos. They're talking about, we have things that we're seeing risks of, as in, they're telling you what they're going to do. And we're hearing about like cyber attacks and maybe like a grid shutdown. So outside of, having your own property away from cities, your deep freezer full of meat, and your own power, what would you say, people should be doing, preparing, and thinking about as we go towards this with the election, whether a real one happens or not? Like, how can people be prepared if stuff, hits the fans?
Without going all, doomsday prepper, crazy. But developing some survival skills is not going to hurt anything. It's only going to help, right? So I would get familiar with how to handle a weapon. There's plenty of courses you can take. I have a concealed carry, but and obviously handled guns a lot throughout my career. But for a civilian who doesn't really have much experience, I would learn, how to handle a weapon properly. I would have one, learn how to just do some basic survival stuff. Learn how, go take a, med course, learn CPR, learn how to do casualty care, stop the bleeding. Because everybody thinks the cool operator shit, go buy a plate carrier and a fucking cry helmet and get an M4 and but if something happens, you fall and you have a fracture and your fucking shin goes through your skin, like, do you know how to splint a leg? Do you know how to stop the bleeding? Do you know how to apply a tourniquet? Like, these are important things that could save your life. Just to give you a brief example of never knowing when shit's going to go south, I was, a trainee. I hadn't even made it to the regular army yet. I was in what's called AIT, Advanced Individual Training. So you go to basic training where you learn how to be a soldier, and then you go to advanced individual training, which is your job specific training. So you learn what your job is actually going to be. So I'm in that, still with drill sergeants and stuff at this time, still have no freedom. So we're in what's called the day room. It's kind of where we hang out. There's a pool table. There's a TV, on your free time on the weekends, it's basically the bottom floor of the barracks where you live. So we're in there hanging out. Me and a buddy are watching TV. Some guys are behind us. They're goofing off. They're like play fighting and shit. One guy like goes to not really like punch, they're playing around, but goes to hit another guy. He ducks. This dude's arm goes through the window, and the glass was not the glass that just shatters. It turned into like a jagged, piece of glass. It cut this guy from his wrist to his elbow wide open. Blood everywhere. Like, the guy is screaming, holding his arm. One of the guys, it was actually my roommate, my bunkmate. I was on the bottom bunk. He slept on the top bunk, and we had a room together in the barracks. He used to be a firefighter. He took his belt off and made a tourniquet and stopped the bleeding long enough for the drill sergeants to get this guy to the hospital. Probably saved his fucking life. And none of us knew what to do. We're just like, our eyes were this big around, and we're like, this is crazy. We've never seen anything like this, just because that guy knew what to do. And those seconds that it took, to get the drill sergeant to get the call the ambulance or whatever to get him to the medical care he needed, probably saved that guy's life.
Yeah, there's a saying that I'm a big fan